Guys, Eminem just dropped his new track Houdini, and it made me realize that we might have a big problem in hip-hop that a lot of people are overlooking. So let's jump into it. Now, this problem starts with Eminem for a couple of reasons. If you guys have been paying attention, then you probably know that for the last couple of years, Eminem has been constantly chasing the success of his old sound and style. And he's been doing this for a while. This goes all the way back to 2009 when he dropped his Relapse album, and he was making songs like We Made You, which were a blatant attempt at chasing the shock value and out-of-pocket bars that he had on songs like My Name Is. And that jig worked well when he was 20 years old, but once you're pushing 40, 50 and you're coming with the same gimmick trying to recreate the personality or abrasiveness that you had when you first came on the scene, it doesn't resonate the same way, and it almost makes you look a little bit desperate to hold on to the past. But after Relapse, he drops the album Recovery in 2010, which was a massive commercial success and actually saw him deviating away from that cartoony Slim Shady sound and replacing it with a more pop sound. That's when we saw him doing a lot of those, cinematic soundtrack type songs with Rihanna and Skylar Grey, where he was just yelling on the verses and you had a pop artist singing a poppy hook. Now, that sound kind of worked for him for a decent bit of time. He had massive hits like Love the Way You Lie or The Monster or I Need a Doctor. But even with the scale and magnitude of these hits, with each and every one of these pop-sounding hits, it kind of got him more and more out of touch with the culture that he once had such a strong pulse on. While guys like Tyler, the Creator, Mac Miller, and Earl Sweatshirt kind of took his place in hip-hop as that quirky, out-of-pocket rapper with that, cartoony shock value. And then you had guys like Macklemore who replaced him as that, white guy with the commercial appeal. So in a almost desperate attempt to continue chasing the past and the success that he had in the past, Eminem then proceeds to drop the album Marshall Mathers LP2, which was a sequel to his most successful album, the Marshall Mathers LP. Again, it sells very well on a commercial level. It has a lot of success, but it doesn't resonate within the culture the same way his early albums did. And looking back on it, it didn't even have the same success or influence that his contemporaries had in that same year, 2013, with guys like Drake who dropped Nothing Was the Same, or Kanye Yeezus, or even, smaller albums like Born Sinner or Watching Movies with the Sound Off. These albums have aged a lot better than the Marshall Mathers LP2, and they were all released in the same year, but none of them had singles as brutal as songs like Berserk or The Monster. This was really, in my opinion, the first sign of Eminem not necessarily falling off, but just not having that same grip on the culture, even from a commercial standpoint, that he did just a few years prior. And he likely noticed this as well because he took a 4-year break and only dropped another album in 2017. Now, what's funny is him and Jay-Z kind of came into the game at the same time, and both of them had that same trajectory in the 2010s, right? Both of them dropped an album in 2013. Jay-Z dropped Magna Carta, Eminem dropped Marshall Mathers LP2. They were both successful commercially, but didn't have that same cultural impact that their earlier work had. So they both proceeded to take 4-year breaks and then drop albums again in 2017. Jay-Z dropped 444 and Eminem dropped Revival. Now the difference here is on Jay-Z's album in 2017, 444, you can hear that maturity, the self-reflection, the care in the production. Like, it really does sound like it took him 4 years to live through things and craft the most personal, high-quality project that he could. He's giving you business advice on it. He's documenting issues that he's had within his family life. It was just a well put together, well thought out album. Meanwhile, Eminem's 2017 effort, Revival, sounded like he was just desperately trying to chase hits. He was collaborating again with those pop stars like Ed Sheeran, Pink. There was no evolution in his sound. He was coming in with this angry, aggressive voice and flow where he's just yelling. And he was kind of doing that since Recovery and received a fair amount of criticism for it. But instead of kind of changing it up, he doubles down on it. And with every track on this album, he's just aggressively yelling over a cinematic pop beat with a pop hook, desperately trying to chase some sort of hit and just falling more and more out of touch with what the culture actually wants from him. Now, this album kind of flopped commercially, didn't sell that much compared to Jay-Z's record, which sold a lot because people actually appreciated the time and care he put into his project. And with that, Eminem definitely became a lot more self-reflective and realized that people didn't view him the same way they once did. Hip-hop was changing. It wasn't focused as much on lyricism, which is unfortunate, but with the rise of guys like Migos, Future, Young Thug, there was a shift to the commercially successful hip-hop being made from trap music, and hip-hop listeners who did appreciate that lyricism and would have probably loved an Eminem project back in 2005 would now rather listen to guys like Tyler, Schoolboy Q, Ab-Soul, Freddie Gibbs, Kendrick, rappers who were bringing something new and refreshing to the game, whereas Eminem just sounded like he was constantly trying to chase and recreate the old hits that he once had. So with the lack of commercial success that Revival had, the big flop that it was kind of made Eminem realize, okay, I'm not where I once was from a commercial level or in the eyes of the general public, basically. And with that, he goes back to the drawing board and drops Kamikaze, which was an album literally devoted just to the critics, the haters, and basically more and more attempts of Eminem trying to return to form while also addressing anyone who thinks that he's not at the top shape that he once was on a lyrical level. Now, where I will give Eminem credit is that he's constantly made a strong effort to win back that love that he once had from the hip-hop community. And with the release of this record, Houdini, it's actually not a bad attempt this time at trying to return back to his old form. The song has a good bounce, it has nice melodies, very reminiscent to his sound on the Slim Shady LP with songs like My Name Is or Without Me. He's not coming in with that, aggressive, angry voice that he was using on a lot of his records in the 2010s. He's not trying to rap at 1,000,000 miles per minute to where the song just sounds like a bunch of words put together. It doesn't even sound, enjoyable. The song has a solid melody to it and really channels that original Slim Shady sound, which, the world initially fell in love with him for. No Diddy. Now, don't get me wrong, I do have some criticisms with this song. Like, I don't love the hook. I find it's too repetitive. He has some extremely corny bars, like lyrical technician, an electrician, y'all light work, and I don't gotta play, pretend, it's you I make believe. If I was to ask for Megan Thee Stallion, if she would come collab with me, would I really have a shot at a feat? Like, I think that given the fact that originally, that Slim Shady character, that persona was the antithesis of being politically correct and was just an unhinged character who kind of went against mainstream society and came out with outlandish bars all the time. And with the current, rise of cancel culture and society just becoming kind of more and more sensitive overall, I think he could have had much more creative, wittier bars that went against the, extremely sensitive keyboard warriors that we see online, or just the rise of cancel culture in general. Similar to how South Park makes satire making fun of modern day issues, I would kind of expect Eminem to do that in audio form. But again, overall, it's not a bad sounding song, and I do think it's his best attempt yet at trying to recreate that, classic Slim Shady sound that he had on songs like My Name Is, Without Me, My Band, and really just all of the Slim Shady LP. But regardless of the song, it really raises a bigger question, which is, how should rappers really be expected to age? Hip-hop's always been known as a young person's sport, with most artists blowing up in their early 20s. But if you think about it, we haven't seen a new rapper come onto the scene and have a massive impact on the culture since a Tyler, the Creator, or a J. Cole, or a Kendrick, which were more than 10 years ago now. So it really begs the question, who's going to take that torch? Who's going to keep hip-hop alive to the level that guys like J. Cole, Drake, Kendrick have been doing? And on the flip side, how are these guys going to age gracefully? It's interesting to see the predecessors of guys like Drake and Kendrick and Cole, how they're currently aging. The guys who were big before them, right? Like Jay-Z, Lil Wayne, Kanye, Nas, and Eminem, they each kind of took different paths in their later careers. And they're each aging out of hip-hop and closing out their legacy in a different way. For example, Nas is almost more active than he's ever been, arguably, dropping 6 phenomenal albums with Hit Boy in the last 3 years. Eminem, like we just spoke about, kind of lost his dominance within the culture and has really been fighting to chase that back with the desperate attempts at commercial massive records and devoting entire albums to either criticizing his critics and haters or trying to recreate that Slim Shady classic sound, which I guess he's doing again on this upcoming album, given that his new single sounds exactly like something he maybe would have released 20 years ago. And hopefully this will be his best attempt yet at, recreating that sound in that moment. Then you got guys like Jay-Z and Lil Wayne who really drop albums very infrequently, not very often. At this point in their careers, they're just kind of known as the GOAT, and they're letting their past work speak for itself. Wayne still hops on features and bodies them. Same thing with Jay-Z. But both of them haven't really released albums in recent years. And when they do, you get albums like 444 or The Carter 5, which include songs that are very personal and self-reflective on their careers, their legacy, and stories that we've never heard before from them in their entire careers, right? You have Lil Wayne talking about how he shot himself and revealed the real story behind that, which we've never heard in his 20 years in the game. You have Jay-Z getting more personal on his family life and his infidelity issues than he's ever been. And it's honestly a lot more tasteful to see the legacy and impact that guys like Wayne and Jay have had in their careers and to not oversaturate the industry with an abundance of albums trying to recreate those moments that they had in the past. Meanwhile, Kanye currently has the most interesting career trajectory out of his entire group of contemporaries. While everyone's constantly chanting that they miss the old Kanye, he's constantly reinventing himself, still staying very in tune with the culture, still dominating and innovating what is considered hot in the culture. And while his recent albums don't live up to the same standard of quality as stuff like The College Dropout or any of his earlier work, he's still one of the most influential figures within the culture, whether it's through fashion or his production on albums like Daytona, or even the listening parties that he's been doing at stadiums. You're now seeing people like Billie Eilish copying that exact same style, showing that no matter how many years into his career, Kanye still dominates the culture. Whatever he does, people are going to follow. And while constantly reinventing himself, he's kept things exciting and kept people interested in what he's going to do next. Whereas, again, I feel like Eminem has been trying to chase that classic sound that initially got him all the success he had, but just being a little bit tone deaf because obviously people have moved on, right? There's people who have gained inspiration from what Eminem initially created. Again, guys like Earl Sweatshirt, Tyler the Creator, anyone from Odd Future, really. And because they're adding something new to the genre, people are choosing to tune into their music more than guys like Eminem. And they're having a greater influence on the future sound of hip-hop rather than what Eminem's doing, which is really not bringing enough evolution into his music. Now again, all these guys, M, J, Kanye, Nas, Eminem, they've all had their own unique kind of way of aging into the later half of their career. But again, it begs the question, what is the right way to go about aging gracefully while still, upholding your legacy and to an extent, maintaining your dominance within the culture? Kanye's 20 years in, he's still dominating the culture. Nas is 20 years in, 30 years in actually, and he's more active than he's really ever been. Guys like Wayne are still hopping on features with the biggest artists today like J.I.D., Tyler, Benny the Butcher, all of Griselda, and they're still bodying those newer rappers, showing that there's still a place for Wayne in the culture given all that he's brought to the game. And then you have guys like M who, no one will forget what they brought to the culture. No one will forget the classic albums like The Eminem Show, Slim Shady and Marshal Mathers LP. No one will ever forget that. But at this point, is it worth it for him to constantly chase that sound, that aesthetic, that persona that he came onto the scene with? Or should he evolve? Or should he just retire? And it makes you think, how will the next generation of hip-hop age as well, right? We're seeing the 2000s rappers like Wayne, Ye, Jay-Z, Eminem, Nas. We're seeing all of them kind of age gracefully and take different paths for the later halves of their careers. And what's scary is we're kind of approaching that moment with guys like Drake, J. Cole, Kendrick, even Tyler, Schoolboy Q, Future, Travis Scott, Meek Mill, Big Sean. Like all these guys kind of came onto the scene around the same time in about 2010. They're like 15 years into the game right now. You're seeing guys like Drake being kind of a fork in the road where they're really trying to connect with the youth, collaborating with the streamers like Kai Cenat, or making songs with Sexy Red and Yeet and chasing that more current sound. But then also being in a confused state because you're getting a lot of criticism from people who grew up listening to you, wondering why you're not aging and maturing. You're trying to chase whatever's hot with the younger generation. Then you're also seeing guys like Kendrick who took 4 or 5 year breaks from hip-hop because they just lacked the inspiration to create bodies of work that they were confident releasing. Now, to be fair, I see most of these guys still having a good, decade left of their careers. I think Drake's got another 10 albums in him. I think Kendrick has another 2-3 minimum strong projects. And given his back and forth with Drake recently, it seems like he's rejuvenated, he's hungry, kind of unlocked a little spark in him. Guys like Tyler are still consistently dropping phenomenal projects. Future shows no signs of slowing up. Same thing with Travis. J. Cole is arguably in his prime lyrically, but keeps teasing retirement, so it's kind of up in the air whether The Fall Off will be his last album or if he'll come in and reinvent himself after that. But even though I don't see, the most dominant rappers of the 2010s retiring anytime soon, it's interesting to see as they approach the later half of their career how they will actually evolve their sound and keep up with what's hot right now or reinvent and innovate the entire culture and the sound of hip-hop. Will a guy like Drake be as dominant in the later 2020s as he was in the later 2010s? Will Kendrick continue to drop more classic projects? Will Tyler continue reinventing himself with each album that he drops? Will J. Cole fall off with his album The Fall Off and just stop dropping music? It's tough to say, and the even bigger problem here is that while these guys are still at the height of their careers dropping phenomenal projects, like I mentioned before, we haven't really seen a new rapper in the last really 10 to 15 years come on the scene and have that same commercial success that we've seen guys like Tyler, Kendrick, J. Cole, Travis, and Drake scene, especially no one from the 2020s. The most we have right now is maybe guys like JID or Griselda or JPEG Mafia being at the forefront of the culture in terms of innovation and bringing a unique sound to the game. But on a mainstream level, we haven't seen a rapper in the 2020s have that same level of mainstream success that guys like Drake, Cole, or Kendrick have had in the 2010s, or Eminem, Lil Wayne, and Kanye had in the 2000s. And that's a problem, right? Because right now, the 2000s rappers are kind of aging on to the last little bit of their careers, and the 2010s rappers are, if not at the last quarter of their career, they're at least at the last half of their career, right? So as all these legendary rappers continue to age, we have two real problems within hip-hop. The first being, how do these rappers age properly where their music continues to evolve, they continue to have a strong impact within the culture, their sound still continues to influence the newer artists the same way it did when they first came on the scene? How do we avoid the problem that Eminem's currently facing where he's constantly trying to chase his old sound, right? We don't want Drake in the year 2030 trying to chase the sound that he had on Thank Me Later or Take Care. It just doesn't make sense. We want our favorite artists to continue evolving. And beyond just how are the legends of the game going to age gracefully and continue to assert their dominance within the culture, no Diddy, we also have to wonder who will be the next group of legendary, impactful, massively successful artists that will continue to carry the torch within hip-hop the same way guys like Drake, Wayne, Jay, Kanye did. I don't see any rapper right now having that same level of impact, that same commercial success, that same level of magnitude as those guys had, which is really a problem because those guys are all going to age out. Those guys are all going to retire eventually, and we will need someone as great as them to replace them. So it really makes you think, like, how will guys like Drake, J. Cole, and Kendrick age out of hip-hop, and what will come after them? And I guess to bring it back to Eminem, how will he cap off his career? Is he going to chase the essence of his old persona, or is he going to kind of evolve and mature within his subject matter and his sound? And what should other artists do? Are you happy with this new Eminem song? Do you want him to just try to recreate the sound that you loved him for back in the early 20,000s? Yes, I said the early 20,000s. I meant the early 2000s. And who's your pick for who will carry the torch after guys like Drake, Kendrick, J. Cole, all the big players today when they retire? Let me know in the comments, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.